one of my graduates worked there, and at the time I ran into him. Randy, great kid, and Randy, we'll come back to Randy a little bit. He was a cop there, and he told me that was the toughest neighborhood in the city. And literally, we started with one classroom, me and 2 teachers. Then we had 2 classrooms, me and 4 teachers, and we slowly built it out to serve these kids.
Welcome to this episode of Mission Control. This is your host, Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands. And we've got a special guest in studio today. We have Mr. Marc Donald, President and CEO of Catalyst CT. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, and so Catalyst CT, formerly Regional Youth Adult Social Action Partnership. That's a mouthful, which is probably part of the rebrand.
That's why we're here.
Right, RYASAP. So Catalyst CT works to ensure the safe and healthy development of youth, young adults, and families by actively engaging organizations, public officials, and community leaders around issues that matter most to the community.
Thanks for having me. We're excited to tell the story and talk about the rebrand and what's going on these days at Catalyst Connecticut or Catalyst CT. Take your pick.
Absolutely. But you're doing God's work, because I just got back from Junior Achievement. Had me speaking down in Norwalk, and Jorge, who we need to introduce because now he's sound man and co-host.
Double duty today, the trick or treat and Puerto Rican.
Okay, the trick or treat and treating Puerto Rican. Got it. Wow. I never know what his intro is going to be, so it's always he keeps us on our toes. But yeah, I was down at I was pouring into the youth, as you would, this morning on behalf of Junior Achievement, one of our dear partners, as is Catalyst.
Great organization.
I made a vow, and this is a deeply personal aspect, but I made a vow when I was 17. I got into some trouble after high school, barely made it into college, but because I got this second chance, if you will, I said, if I'm ever asked to speak to kids, I'm going to do it. Because I just know from firsthand, like, how critical who your peer group is at that age. If you're around the wrong guys or gals, your life can go one way or the other. And so it's a big part of my DNA, who I am, what we're about, and why we're so proud to have you here. Is why it's so important to pay it forward to our young people.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, so many of us are on that razor's edge, and the story of getting in trouble is not unique to you, right? And sometimes we get in a little bit of trouble and we can come back from it. Sometimes we have a little bit more trouble coming back from it. And I think, quite frankly, that's why I do what I do. And, that sometimes kids get in trouble and they have the resources to get out of that trouble, right? Sometimes kids get into trouble and they don't have the resources. So what happens to them? They've got that mark for the rest of their lives. That is more than just, a one-off incident.
Yeah, I know. As a kid, I remember reading about the concept of the self-fulfilling prophecy. And I don't know if it's still PC to say that, but, our generation, Gen X, we were afraid of a lot of things. Quicksand, sharks, bees, nuclear war. So they added the self-fulfilling prophecy to the list. It was sort of like if you label a kid or you're the kid and you believe that's the limit of where you're going, my dad wasn't around, so I'm not going to be around, or my big brother went to jail, so I'm probably going to go to jail. Whether it's negative or positive, I think we almost manifest a vision for ourselves, and why it's so important for kids to think big and to see representation and to see what's possible.
Totally. What you believe is what you become. And too often it is what you see on a day-to-day basis. And whether you're labeled as a ADHD kid or a troublemaker, or you're expected to go to college. So a lot of times that's what we do.
It's true.
What we
There's
fulfill.
so much of this generational, we'll call it generational trauma that gets passed down from one to the next, where you have to kind of have an intentional mission to break it, to change it, or else oftentimes you just that kind of becomes your default mode. Like, well, I saw my big brother do this, or my cousin, or whatever it is around you. So, and that could fall into a bunch of categories. And I think it's so interesting that, I feel like your teenage years are a lot about pushing up against the boundaries of, okay, I'm transitioning from a kid to an adult, and in this middle ground, I don't really know how far I can push these things, and I want to do all the things that all the adults are doing, and I want to, dip my toes into all these things and be cool, and try things out. But at the same time, if you don't have a good, one stupid childhood mistake could be the one thing that changes your whole trajectory forever. So
absolutely, and it's also just expanding their horizons, like kids not being able to see beyond their own neighborhood or beyond their city block, and just having them have new experiences. I know that if it wasn't for certain teachers, like teachers play a big role in this, as counselors do in social service programs, but if it wasn't for a certain art teacher who said, you know what, I'm going to get you into this after school program at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. So I grew up in Providence, and she got a way for me to go in a subsidized program. So which is why now, as we're writing checks. We're helping these organizations, because if you benefited from them, then why wouldn't you want them to be there for the next generation? And this program was a portfolio preparation course. So I would walk from my neighborhood to the east side of Providence to RISD, and my parents had no clue. And there's a lot to unpack here, because a lot of the kids that Catalyst is serving, they're first generation, so their parents are busy working. And they're first generation, so they can't guide the kids. So which is why these community organizations are so important. And going into that program was like, okay, now I'm learning how to prepare a portfolio. Why? So that I could show it to a potential college. Why? So that I could go to art school. And all my parents knew was, oh, Junior's doing something. Yeah, they call me Junior, but they would be like, Junior's doing something after school. We don't know. Well, he can't work today because he's at this place. And here I was, like a 17-year-old kid from the hood in a museum painting on a canvas. And talk about dreams deferred, right? So it's wild. It's wild why these things are so important. And I do want you guys to talk about, as a dad, because my kids are grown, so I call them adults now. But as a dad and as someone leading a program like Catalyst, what do today's kids? What do they need today? Because they're living with social media. They got a lot of other factors that we didn't have coming up.
I think there's a lot to be said about what kids are exposed to and how you choose to approach that. And I respect that everybody's going to have a different approach to this, and some people's parenting guidelines are going to differ wildly. I've got two ends of the spectrum right now. I have a teenage college student, and I have a second grader. So totally at like the opposite ends of the spectrum here. But even with
you just missed the window where she could help you with the toddler.
Right, exactly. I mean, she's been a great big sister. Yeah. I got to give her credit. But we had our moments, going through high school, especially going through high school in the COVID era, created a whole different element of like, hey, I am missing out on part of this teenage experience. And what do you're trying to be a good guiding light, but at the same time, so you have to role model, I think, and be as positive influence as possible. But the decision has to come from them as well. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And so I think it's important to note that I think if you push too hard, and this is just my personal experience, if you push too hard and you try to kind of like rein them in too much, it makes that teenage rebellion explode that much more. So as much as you want them to be safe and secure and everything as possible, it also creates it also creates this element of, okay, you're kind of compressing it, and then it's gonna explode that much harder as it pushes back. Something that my nieces are struggling with right now is they come in, they've just kind of become teenagers, and I'm seeing that, and I've kind of gone to my daughter to feel like, hey, any advice here would be great, because now we're in this era of social media, and just keeping your kids totally sheltered from the internet and from all of that is this crazy. My own daughter's perspective was to deny your kids the internet altogether is crazy. Like socially, you're going to be an outcast, But then also you're going to be naive, and you're also going to not like, okay, you're going to run into some things, but if you don't run into them on your own, then you're going to run into them when your friends show you them. And then that might be even worse. So there's a lot of perspective there that I think is interesting, in that the world is totally different. Like your access to knowledge now with the advent of AI and how that's impacting things. There's got to be this balance where you need to show them the road, role model positively, show them what's possible, show them the alternative as to, what a lot of those other things are. And I think that's been the most successful thing for me as a dad, to be able to say, hey, I want you to make your own decisions. I want to be able to be a good role model for you. But ultimately, I can't keep you trapped in this bottle, because it's going to explode, in the wrong direction.
So, Mark, what are you seeing as far as, like, what dictates some of the programming? Is it what the kids need? Are you canvassing to see what kids want to hear or learn more about?
I mean, I think, you said it very well. We can demonize social media, but that's not going to do anything for our kids, because they're still going to access it. Right. And I think as we approach it, and, I've got a 19 and a 15-year-old, so I kind of have the dual model of looking at them and also looking at the youth we're working with. And really what we're aiming to do is help the young people be critical consumers of the information, right? And if you start with social media, let's use Instagram, right? You are seeing these beautiful people and their best, right? And their
exotic
shiny
places.
Exactly. And like I see it, and I'm like, damn,
It's like they're 15 at Santorini, and I was 40 when I, what I mean? It's like
incredible, and they're all over the place. But you have to understand that that's their best self, right? That is filtered, and to heck with the real filters, but it's filtered, right? I'm not putting a picture of me raking leaves in the backyard, right? Yeah. I'm not, putting a I don't know, me screwing up and stuttering on a podcast. It's like, that's not happening. But with the young people, it's like, this is not reality. Right. And so the mental health and all that is popping up too. And
they're comparing, right?
It's a comparison thing. And then it's also like the brain wiring thing. But, I can tell my 15-year-old to put up his phone, right? Mm-hmm. And chances are I'm going to fall asleep before him and he's going to grab his phone. But, it's like, hey, let's talk about this. It messes with your sleep. Your sleep messes with your mentals, right? And how can they do all that? And I think it is an educational piece. I was listening to a podcast on the way over. It was an educational. Sometimes it's a comedy. Sometimes it's educational. Sometimes it's, no, I want to listen to music and just tune out. But working with the young people as a tool, using this stuff. I mean, the mental health crisis is real, right? And young people, especially, you talk about, urban environments or people who are growing up in poverty, and they see pictures of Santorini. It's like, oh, I'm never going to get that, right? My uncle's in jail, my dad's in jail, I'm going to be in jail, or I'm not going to live past 20. It's like, okay, we really have to think about this and how we're engaging them where they are, instead of saying, oh, social media is bad. Oh, those are bad kids, right? With the labels and stuff. And I think really that's kind of the key to our program. And it's not easy, right? We're trying to stay ahead of things and predict the next iteration and how we reach them, right? We're struggling with the TikTok, right? Because I don't even know how they do that. But but
I'll say that does help. Being on the platforms, being able to kind of engage with your kids on the platform, I think just, hey, this is going on in the world today type of a thing.
Just the awareness.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Just the awareness of like what that culture is, I think helps you connect and helps you kind of keep maybe not, lets you at least understand.
I read somewhere that they get 75% of their news from TikTok.
That's insane. And so there's where the remote control hurricane news is coming from.
I used to be more of a consumer of Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. And I'm thinking, if I got 20% of my news from that, then I'm, and banter with my own kids, I'm like, we talk, current events or whatever. And I'm like, oh, did you get that from TikTok? No, Dad. I like that. Where'd you get it? Right? Who did you hear it from? Yeah. Right? Do your work.
Right. Well, right when we come back, we're going to dive into what makes you tick, and how you came to lead this great organization. And we'll be back right after these words.
If you've got an innovation that you want to bring to the world, the first step is making sure you've got a great domain name. Visit shop.spacehost.pro to grab your domain name today and begin your new venture and your new business. Shop.spacehost.pro.
3, 2, 1. Launch frames.
And we're back. Please help me once again welcome Marc Donald, President and CEO of Catalyst CT. The fans, they go wild here. They've been camped out. They knew you were coming, dressed in the Catalyst drip, as the kids say. You got all the swag.
Got to represent. Got to represent.
Represent. You're doing it well, Marc. So tell us your story.
So, mine's kind of a circuitous story. I did most of my growing up in South Carolina. The funny accent is a little bit there, but a little bit being a child of West Virginia hillbillies. So, here I am. And, just kind of that's where I did most of my growing up and started thinking, that there was other places I wanted to go, and as many, stories can go. You meet a girl and, ended up in deciding through my own circuitous way that teaching was going to be my gig, and I wanted to do it in the inner city because where I grew up was very interesting. You would call where I grew up suburban, but literally a baseball throw away was rural-ish with barely running water, right? And you can fill in the narrative, right? That who lived on one side of the fence, who lived on the other side, especially in the deep South, right? So the white kids, suburbia, right? And on the other side of the fence were black kids. And we went all to the same schools, and you're just kind of seeing like, oh, but for the grace of God go I, right? Like, there's something doesn't mix. You're young, you don't know what's going on. I didn't know what was going on. And my college roommate said, I'm going to go to grad school and be a teacher. And I was tending bar and having a good old time. And I said, you know what? That sounds good. Right. And so I applied. I was an undergrad English major. And I said, you know what? I want to teach history. So I applied. Too late for the history. So, I was undergrad history major. So too late. So, okay, you know what? I had a lot of English credits. Let me apply to English. So dumb luck, they accepted me. And, that's where I met my now wife. And we moved up to New York City. First place I interviewed, this is a very funny story. I had two interviews, one in Lower Manhattan, right by Battery Park, across the Statue of Liberty. And the next one was over in Brooklyn. And I got lost on the way to Brooklyn. And I got an offer from the one in Lower Manhattan. So, all right, let's check the box there. And later on, I asked my boss, I said, well, why did you hire me? I didn't have any experience. You're putting me in the South Bronx with some really tough kids. He's like, Marc, I didn't have a choice. I had to open a school in a month. So anyway, ended up in the South.
So you were like minimum qualifications,
it was,
breathing.
Do you have a pulse? Yeah. Do you have a pulse, right?
Warm body. Okay, put them in there.
That's it. And it was at a charter school. It actually was the first charter high school in New York City. And charter schools get a little bit of a bad name. But for me, we were designed to get to the kids who had been failed by society. Now, some of them own that failure. They got expelled. They got kicked out, right? They failed out, right? But there's a whole lot of other factors involved. So literally, I went to this school in South Bronx in Hunts Point, the 41st Precinct, one of the toughest neighborhoods. I had a graduate later on.
I remember the movie Fort Apache.
That's
the Bronx.
That's it, right? Don't say that there. They get offended at that. That is not good. But yeah, that was the precinct. And later, that's right. That's right. One of my graduates worked there, and at the time I ran into him. Randy, great kid, and Randy, we'll come back to Randy a little bit. He was a cop there, and he told me that was the toughest neighborhood in the city. And literally, we started with one classroom, me and two teachers. Then we had two classrooms, me and four teachers. and we slowly built it out to serve these kids in Hunts Point. Even later on, there was an HBO documentary, Hookers at the Point, right? If you ever saw it, I was in the great big building at the end, 4th floor, 3rd floor, overlooking, and
how did you adapt to that environment coming from West Virginia?
I'm from South Carolina. You got to be careful there because I'm a Gamecock at heart. But college football. I think that was just, I went into it with open eyes, right? I was not coming in here as the white savior, right? I was not coming in to save kids. I just really wanted to work with the kids, and even the first.
And where did that passion come from? Just out of curiosity.
Maybe my own background. I, like Ramon, got in a little bit of trouble. May have been to a few expulsion hearings, but I was also, kind of the ADHD kid who had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. You can't do it, so how dare you say that? All right, so, these kids can't learn. Screw you! I'm going to show you they can learn. Right? They taught me way more. But literally, the first day I pull up into on the corner of Lafayette and Barreto, across from Julio Caraballo Park. And I park the car and I get out and I see this woman who's got this bright fluorescent, like skin tight dress. She was probably 6'3", and I'm like, wow, right? This is real. And so
broad daylight too.
Broad daylight. I mean, I'm going into
the pimp
school
somewhere nearby.
100%. And I start walking towards her, and as it became clear that this woman was a man.
Oh no!
And I just immediately thought, "Whoa, okay, you're not in South Carolina anymore."
Welcome to the Big Apple.
That's it. And so I went upstairs and I struggled through, and just had a really, I still to this day have great relationships with some of those kids. Randy was one of them. Narema, Shakima, and Jade. Right? They've got kids that are my oldest age. And I see them on Facebook and Instagram, and their kids are going to college, and I'm just like, that's what it's about. I used to, especially when I was a principal, I had pictures of the kids behind me, and I would say, those kids call me grandpa, and the kids would be like, wait a minute, mister, those kids are black, you're not. And I'm like, nope, their mother called me father because that was the relationship we had. And 30 odd years later, here I am, and it's been a great journey.
Well, the power, I don't know, the impact that you can have, it just kind of, it's like the ripple effect in a positive way. Because each generation does better and better. Yeah.
And I think about how much those kids taught me, and they taught me way more, and even kids, it's funny, kids, I can't wait to graduation because I'm going to kick your ass. and like later on, they're hitting me up, hey, Mr. D, how are you? What's going on? And I'm thinking, it was tough love, and I may not have done it the right way, like parents, right? We're parents. We do the best we can, but.
And relatable. I think
absolutely.
You were definitely relatable with your background and just being authentic. So you're in the Bronx, and then how do you end up making your way up to Connecticut?
Yeah, again, it's kind of life events. We were looking for some grass for the dog and to have kids, and we looked in Westchester, and no grass, taxes too high. Let's start looking in Connecticut.
The yards are getting bigger.
That's it, and I told the wife, and I said, I can't go past Fairfield because that commute is legit. And so we ended up in Fairfield 19 years ago. I commuted to the Bronx for 8 years, and wife said, all right, I want to get back in the workforce, and you need to get your butt out here. And I found a great spot at Domus, and it's based in Stamford, and I ran the alternative middle school as a principal. And wow, that was an education. So I had 250 kids at my Bronx high school, 16 to 22, right? You couldn't start a high school age at 21, but so we had some that were 22. gang members, 6'2", real dudes, badasses. And I got this opportunity, which fed my life mission, which is working with these tough middle school kids. And, my boss, when he hired me, said, there's 48 kids. And I thought, man, I am going to be kicking my feet up. This is going to be a breeze. Gentlemen, those kids kicked my ass. Man. 48 middle school kids.
I believe it.
That's the toughest
and I feel
age.
like that's
I think middle is the toughest.
The toughest. And I think that's the turning point for a lot of kids.
It is.
That going from elementary school, you still kind of have some of that childhood innocence. Yeah. Not everybody, clearly, but middle school is where, hey, this is the real world.
Yeah.
And it seems like, what do you mean middle school, the real world? Like, your eyes are opened and the veil
Some
is
educators will tell you point blank, they'll teach any grade except middle school.
I'm one of them. said it this morning. I was in a meeting with the assistant superintendent in Bridgeport. I said, people who teach middle school are crazy.
But you had definitely had a special gift for dealing, because the common denominator so far is that these are at-risk youth, the alternative education. They're kids that have been failed, and Lord knows we need more folks like you. But you definitely had this gift. Like, what made you so relatable to them? Why'd they like you so much?
I think it's just a mutual thing, right? I really loved working with them. I'm a former athlete. I loved working in a team that loved working with them. And I'm telling you, that team we had at that middle school in New Haven, it was one of the strongest teams I'd ever seen within a school. At any given time, I would be in teaching a class, right? A behavioral tech would be, sweeping the floor, a teacher. And this was a teachers union shop. They didn't have to do it. A teachers union.
But everybody rolled up their sleeves.
Literally, like my teachers union rep would teach the kids how to repair drywall that they kicked in. Right, because these kids were very traumatized. They had a lot of, issues. Some were born drug addicted. Some were on the spectrum, and so they had these behaviors. And what good is it going to do to suspend them when they put their foot through it? No, we're going to do real restorative justice, and they're going to sit
in real time.
That's it. And once they're de-escalated, all right, now you have to repair it.
Right.
And I'm telling you, those kids are some of the best drywallers. And if you guys have ever done drywall, that's no joke.
Yeah, no, that's an art.
Like, you can hang it, you can screw it, but it really is.
It is, because otherwise you'll be sanding for days and it'll look terrible.
Yep.
But it's definitely an art form. But I think it's also, what are you modeling? If you get into a shouting match, then what are you teaching them? That's how you handle things violently, and then that escalates into physical. But it sounds like you guys had the tools and the teams.
Yeah. And
did you find yourself with a propensity for leadership, or did you have to develop that?
I mean, I think it's a little bit like, I was a college athlete, and I was never the star athlete. Right. So I was used to carrying the water, and I enjoyed that. And I think the leadership, I guess maybe it's, it's a little bit born, a little bit learned, and a little bit kind of, this is what we have to do to get the job done, to have the biggest impact. And I have no trouble following people who lead too. So, I think that's the one good thing about the teams, all the teams that I ever worked in the professional environment is, you got this, I'll follow your lead and I'll roll up the sleeves with you. So, I think that's kind of what it is. And certainly make a lot of mistakes these days, and it's all in the effort of trying to make more of an impact and help these kids out.
Absolutely. And take us up to RYASAP, because Bridgeport is, I fell in love with Bridgeport when I visited UB. Coming from Providence, it was very similar, diverse, underserved, a lot of potential. Is always what you hear about Bridgeport. It has a lot of potential. What attracted you to this role and the good works that are being done there?
Well, I think it might sound a little cheesy, but it's the life mission, right? And really the opportunity fit where I was in my career and my life. I had gotten to a senior executive position at Domus, and there's no room to move. Bridgeport, I never really engaged with it, even though I live, 2.5 miles from the border. Just kind of reading and whatnot.
You were kind of going Fairfield South, not Fairfield North.
Right. Yeah, and even when I was in New Haven, it was Fairfield. It was just driving right on by, and the opportunity, and the organization that had deep roots in the community was well respected for working with community members. And then the kind of the direct service work as well, working with some of the toughest kids that people don't want to work with or have given up on. I think that was intriguing as well.
Yeah, years ago we worked on the Teen Yellow Pages.
Oh yeah,
back when print was more popular, probably before the advent of all the social media and so forth. We would help put together that booklet. But what always kind of impressed was that it wasn't just a typical after school program for where you're babysitting kids until parents get out of work. There was it felt like very holistic. There was drug and alcohol counseling, there was mental health support, there was suicide hotlines. So it was a very all-encompassing approach, because I think that you hear about it in law enforcement where the controversial topic of defund the police doesn't mean less police. It just means let's apply some resources to mental health, because maybe then we'd have less criminals. It's not just wait until they're ready to be incarcerated. Let's see if we can take some steps earlier. So maybe expand a bit about that. I definitely want to hear about the rebrand. But when you came on board, it was still RYASAP.
It was still RYASAP. And, again, great organization with 35 years of reputation. Right? So people were attached to the name, right? To introduce it new,
the brand,
was,
right?
Yeah, they knew the brand. To introduce it to new people was always a challenge. So, again, and I inherited a very strong organization, a stable organization that had a reputation for responding to community needs. So I don't have to worry about that piece. What I had to worry about is how can we be proactive with responding to community needs. So I started in January of 2019. And so I said, let me be very slow and deliberate, because Bridgeport's a very interesting city. If I would have come in, I'm going to save the world, I'm the new guy, this is how we're going to do things, Bridgeport would have shut me out. Right. So I really tried to build relationships and get the lay of the land and kind of see where people were. And then I said, well, to introduce to new people, to new funders, to new ambassadors, we got to do a rebrand. So 2020, I'm in for a year, and let's get the rebrand started. COVID had other ideas, and I mean, it was very disruptive for society, period. Organizationally, it was massively disruptive. We went from 27 employees to 47 employees in 8 months.
Wow.
So we're talking about building culture. We're talking about, all these things. Meanwhile, we are being ultra reactive to community need while recognizing that when kids come out of this, they're going to be in worse shape.
They're set back. They lost 2 years.
Yeah.
Social skills,
and
learning.
At the time, we didn't even know, but we knew that some were in toxic environments, and they were now in that toxic environment for 24 hours a day instead of getting an 8-hour reprieve.
I think that's something that so many people forget about.
Yeah,
that,
they do. Yeah,
that,
they do.
That's where you were getting not only healthier social interaction, but just food. Exactly. Like
not getting beat or whatever, God forbid, whatever toxic, like you said, environment you were exposed to. Yeah. That was a place where you got a break from it, and that was taken away.
Yeah, no, and very hesitant to close food, because sometimes that was the only time kids were getting, a balanced meal. So that became a challenge, and we had to respond to community needs. So we created a few programs to get into the schools to try and prevent suspensions and expulsions, because now these kids' behaviors are escalated. And as an educator, you've got a class of 25 and a kid's acting up, or 2 kids are acting up. How are you supposed to teach the 23 kids? Right. So it's like, all right, how can we help educators be better prepared to work with these kids? How can we help the kids be better prepared to develop skills they need? And how can we keep the community intact? So we did a lot of work around that. So COVID slowed down a little bit, and we got our programs on solid footing. Our Street Safe Gang Intervention program, they actually delivered food during the pandemic. So, we were doing everything.
Into the hood?
Into the hood. They would go wherever. I think that some of them, they were going to Norwalk because the food distribution, people were so overwhelmed. And you talk about defund the police. The police got money for food distribution, and a police captain called me up and he said, "Mark, I need your help. I've got money to do food distribution." I said, "I don't do food distribution. That's a whole different kettle of fish. I don't want to bother with that." "Mark, I got nobody to give it to. I trust you to do it." And I'm thinking, all right, we'll figure it out. So literally my credible messengers, guys who have lived a life, they spent time in prison, now they're giving back to the kids to keep them out. They're delivering food to seniors.
Talk about listening to your audience or your customers.
That's absolutely amazing.
And creating a new service vertical.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that grant ended and the food need, they caught up. And so we got back to, our hedgehog, as they say. We got back to what we do. And so we said, all right, now we have to look at where we want to be the next 30 years. And we started the whole rebrand process. And man, you do it for a living.
Yeah.
I'm an English teacher. That was painful.
But you knew why.
Yes.
Because you set this vision and you said, in order for us to get there, these are the things we need to do.
We needed we need an inspirational work. We needed something that captures our complex work, because we do, gun violence prevention. We do restorative practice and social emotional learning in schools. We reduce mental health stigma. We do cannabis, vaping, gambling addiction prevention. All these different factors. How do you capture that in one name? And then we really, as we dug in, we thought about what is our core competency? Well, we're the only organization that I'm aware of in the nation, much less Connecticut, that does direct service with youth, educates and trains the community, and then goes up to Hartford and DC and does policy advocacy, because we see what works and we see what doesn't. And we're non-political, but listen, my youth diversion team program, evidence that we save tax dollars. We've got evidence that we save lives. Wow. How can you argue with that?
Exactly.
Right?
That's compelling.
And so when we talk to people, we want to say, like, RYASAP, Regional Youth Adult Social Action Partnership. By the time I'm done with that, well, what do you do?
Right.
We're Catalyst Connecticut, Catalyst CT. Our core competency is building on the strengths of community and working alongside them. We're not going into communities and saving them, right? We're not a savior. What's the strength when you're working in public housing that's facing gun violence? Right now we have a great program going where we're doing focus groups with residents of public housing, with PT partners, and getting focus groups on how they think we should prevent gun violence and reduce gun violence. The Fairfield U is studying those focus groups. So you got we got people, the community's voice, we've got PhDs studying it, and then you got the people who can implement the work, right? Nobody's stepping on toes. We collaborated on the grant. Yeah. It's not, I'm elbowing so I can get money. It's like, these resources are for us and for the community. And that, I think that's illustrative of our core competency. One district, I'll keep it nameless, faced a rash of youth suicides, right? Heartbreaking, right? My team rolled up the sleeves, and that the school district was reeling, right? They were hurting. They still engaged in a district-wide suicide prevention training, right? We can't do that to people. We have to do it with people. And kudos to them for having the fortitude and the courage to do it. And, super kudos to my staff who conducted the training. They were so emotionally worn out, I had to give them a couple of days to reset.
And to have the empathy to come in and arm in arm and not like, hey, we're preaching to you, follow this curriculum or something cold. Yeah. What intrigues me about the rebrand, I love it, but also that there's opportunity almost to franchise this. I could see like Catalyst RI or Catalyst,
Now we're talking.
M.A.
Let's take over the world.
Take over the world. Spread this, because I'm sure that folks are doing it and from this, in other states, obviously, but I think that they could model. You guys can serve as sort of a model program for this. So any success stories you want to share, that something that might stand out as an example for our listeners to kind of see the impact you're making?
Yeah, I think there's several. I think the biggest ones probably involved young people who were deep in the gang life, right? And thinking of this young man, we'll call him Daryl, right? Daryl was deep in the life. We had one of our credible messengers, Dennis, who's amazing. This guy's great. All the guys are great. Really, they recognized that they made their own mistakes. They paid their debt to society. We know that prison doesn't finish paying the debt because they have to pay when they come out. But he came out and he said, I want to change kids' lives. I want to prevent them from tearing up the neighborhood. So relentlessly mentoring this young person. This young person is now a graduate of Housatonic Community College. He's now on a pipeline to a full-time gig doing manufacturing, right? Are there bumps in the road, or is everything a success? No, but that's the young man that we continue doing the work for, right? Absolutely. We're working really hard around this mental health stuff. And, cannabis is legalized now, gambling's legalized now, so the addiction to both of those is going up. But how are we educating the community on harm reduction, different techniques? And, we're getting out there. Fentanyl overdoses are getting lower, right? That's a scourge of the community. Through Narcan, we're reviving, and we do the training, naloxone. We do all the training. So now people are better armed to assist people. And yeah, people might need to be revived 2, 3, 4 times. But on that 4th time, are they now in recovery? Right? We're keeping somebody's brother, sister, uncle, cousin alive, and now they have the opportunity to get into recovery.
That's amazing.
Right?
That's amazing. Dopamine, cannabis, alcohol, caffeine for us here at PD. There's so many isms out there, but you guys are really doing the Lord's work, and I commend you because we need it. We need more of it, and everyone deserves a second chance. And they don't need to be boxed in. Your mistakes don't define you, and there's greatness in all of us. So I really love what Catalyst stands for. For those listeners out there, are there opportunities to volunteer? Are there opportunities to support monetarily? Maybe someone has a young person that could benefit. What would be the next step?
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about Catalyst is we have something to offer everyone, right? If you're interested in direct service with youth, if you're interested in, substance misuse, mental health, restorative practices. We've got a lot. So you just go to catalystct.org on the internet, or you can go to Catalyst NCT on any of the socials and check us out. But there's a lot of opportunity. We've got an event coming up in February 27th. It's going to be a Mardi Gras theme, just a fundraiser at Park City Music Hall. But it's a soft fundraiser. You come, you have a good time, you buy tickets, and you listen to some good New Orleans jazz, which I think everybody can like the vibe.
And some gumbo.
Oh, you don't want gumbo at a concert hall, but we're gonna have some New Orleans style food. Yeah, something a little bit
jazz. We'll have some jazz.
You can dance with instead of getting beads. Gumbo on your shoe. Beads. We'll have masks. Game on, man! I can't wait. It'll be an exciting time.
That sounds.
And besides, it's after the Super Bowl, before March Madness, so people are looking for stuff to do.
It's gonna be great.
Come down and check us out.
I love it. Well, Marc, thank you for being on our show.
Thanks for having me.
I do want to say that you do have other languages too. You're servicing the Latino community.
Absolutely.
So we have the pleasure of working with you in some of the materials, and know that we're doing our best to reach out to everyone.
Absolutely.
In the greater Bridgeport area. So I commend you once again. Continue to do God's work. You're changing lives, impacting lives, and your visionary leadership is going to continue to take Catalyst to even higher heights. So keep it up.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. It's a great time.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being. Thank you for listening to this episode of Mission Control. Until next time, this is Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands.